Who am I? Who are you? Welcome to episode 5 of the Leader Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, David Brown-Dawson. The Leader Fitness Podcast is brought to you by Lead Gym, your go-to place to become the best version of yourself and the leader your team needs. Lead Gym helps leaders and teams get healthy, increase performance, and maximize impact. On this episode, this is going to be a fun one. On this episode, we're going to dive into the question, who am I? I want you to answer that question. So I will ask you, who are you? Now, throughout this episode, I'll be sharing more about myself. And as much as this episode consists of me peeling back the layers of my own life, it really is an invitation for you to do the same. What I've found is that when we wrap our identities around what we do, when what we do changes, our sense of self disintegrates and we can find ourselves lost, frustrated, and we can be susceptible to drifting. Drifting is that passive state where we're moving but not in control of the direction. And if you remember, if you've listened to the previous episode 4 of the Leader Fitness Podcast, we really took a deep dive into the book Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. Yes, the author of Think and Grow Rich. This book was written around the same time as Think and Grow Rich, but wasn't released until 70 years later. And we unpacked that book. Actually, we really only go through the first half. There's going to be a part 2 at some point, but how would you stop you? And what we were really talking about there was wanting to understand ourselves and what we are susceptible to as leaders. What are we susceptible to, and how do we guard against those susceptibilities? In this episode, we're going to get after this question, who am I? The idea, in short, is that instead of wrapping our identities around what we do, we should operate from the inside out. We should lead from the inside out. And in doing so, what we do may change, but who we are stays the same. And so we won't find ourselves dealing with imposter syndrome or feeling lost if we transition from one career to another or from one role to another. We'll dive into it. So I want to start with a story. During my first year of business school, so in 2019, I left the Air Force. I was a civil engineer officer and an air advisor. And I transitioned out of the Air Force into business school. I went to the University of California at Berkeley, the Haas School of Business, to get my MBA. During my time there, we took a class called Leadership Communication. We called it LeadCom. Yes, my company LeadCom Gym pays homage to that class and my professor at the time, Court Worthington. This class, LeadCom, was a self-discovery and emotional intelligence class disguised as a public speaking class. The first speech of the semester is the Who Am I speech. Let me tell you a little bit about how that impacted me. Quick backstory though. I came to business school thinking everyone had it all figured out. But early conversations during week 0, which is our orientation week, were basically regurgitations of our applications, which meant that idea that everybody had it all figured out seemed accurate at the time. So I come into business school thinking, hey, everybody has it all figured out. We start these conversations during week 0, during orientation week, and it seems like everybody has it figured out. What I recognized is that I was craving deeper connections. I believe that authentic relationships occur. I believe that authentic relationships are built when we have genuine conversations. So in multiple conversations that I was having with classmates at the time, I found myself getting a little frustrated. And finally, I remember expressing this idea of, we've all been accepted. Now let's talk about who we actually are. Let's throw away this idea of, oh, we're polished and we're essentially interviewing each other. And it's like, no, we've been accepted. Let's just, who are you? Like, why are you actually here? Then came the start of classes and the Who Am I speeches. Imagine being in a room with strangers and suddenly the veil lifts. One person, I won't say her name, she knows who she is and our group knows who she is. She chose to be vulnerable and opened up about her struggles, about her lived experience. It set the tone for all of us to go deeper. I remember in that first class, Court even said, he would often say, go with the second story, share the second story. And the idea was like, yes, we have the one that makes us seem polished and all put together and everything, but he was really getting after like, embrace the opportunity to be vulnerable because you can build those connections when you are a little bit more vulnerable. Man, so again, I won't say her name, but she chose to be vulnerable and opened up about her struggles and her experiences. It set the tone for all of us to go deeper. What she did in that moment was leadership. She chose to go first. She chose to be vulnerable. And in doing so, she influenced and encouraged us to do the same. And when I tell you it set the tone for the entire semester, it set the tone for the entire class and really for the entire semester. And for me, it set the tone for the entire experience, because no longer were we walking around with everything figured, like as if we had everything figured out. It was really, we recognized the humanity in each other and that we may have come from various lived experiences. None of us were perfect, and we were excited to learn and grow and meet people and essentially step into our next chapter of our lives. So I'm curious, what about you? When was the last time you shared your story? Not the polished version, but the version that makes you human. See, most of the time when we meet someone, the go-to question is, what do you do? I'm not a fan of that question. Why? Because it limits people to their roles, their jobs. My go-to question, I like to ask people, what do your days look like? I ask this because some people are in school, some work, some are business owners, some have lives in which they don't work the traditional way, and some people are in between jobs. And so for my mind, asking what do your days look like is actually the most inclusive question to ask. The added bonus of it is that it really allows people to share what they're actually about and what they can share, what they want to share. Maybe it's their day job, or maybe it's something that they're passionate about that is taking up more and more time. You miss out on that when you just say, what do you do? I was actually having a conversation with a buddy of mine, and this buddy is, he is a musician. He's a business builder. He's a product manager. He does a number of things. And so like if somebody just asks him, what do you do? I remember having a conversation, and the way I understood him was he even feels a little boxed in when somebody asks him, what does he do? Because he's so many more things in addition to what he does in his day job. Now, from the first episode of this podcast, you know my absolute favorite question. And that question is, if you could do anything in the world and money wasn't a concern and you knew you wouldn't fail, what would you do? Now, I don't always ask that question immediately in a conversation. I will often save that question for when it feels appropriate. And there are some times when I meet somebody and it feels appropriate to ask that question, and other times when I dial it back. To what do your days look like? Or one of the ones that I like that's kind of in the middle is, what gives you energy and what brings you joy? These two questions reveal more about somebody's spirit than the surface level, what do you do, ever could. The deeper idea is that in our society, we place a lot of value on what someone does for work. I don't necessarily disagree with this, but I do disagree with the idea of aligning someone's value as a human with what they do for work. This idea that our value as humans is somehow tied to the work that we do, again, is something I just don't fully agree with. Now, I do think it's important to find work or find a way to employ the gifts that we've been given. Using our gifts as stewardship. And that's one of the reasons why I got certified as a working genius facilitator, because that assessment does help you get after the type of work that brings you energy and joy. And I'll just plug it now. If you or your team is looking to bring that in as a way to, it's fascinating to see this in action. If you're really wanting to see another level of your team and you're wanting to see what brings you and your team energy and joy, you can do this individually or you can do this as a team. And just connect with us at leadcomgym.com, or you can send an email to david@leadcomgym.com, and we'll get together and we'll see what it looks like to bring the working genius into your space and into your team. That wasn't meant to be a commercial, but LeadCom Gym is the sponsor of the Leader Fitness podcast. So I guess that was a commercial. Let's dive back in. So using our gifts is all about stewardship. And so it is important when we're talking about who am I, it is important to understand what's in our garden, and we'll get there in a moment. It's important to understand the gifts that we have, the ideas, the opportunities, the abilities that we've been given, so that we can then use them we can use them for the good of others and for the glory of God. Now, I've had the privilege of serving in the military, attending one of the top business schools, working in corporate America, and now building my own business. Along the way, I've worked with amazing people in each of these spaces. And while I'm proud of these accomplishments, here's the thing. What I do doesn't define who I am. I'll say it again. What I do doesn't define who I am. God, this is so good. Look, at LeadComm Gym, I work with leaders and teams to help them build resilience, enhance communication, and maximize impact. But underneath that, I'm here to help people grow. I'm here to help people gain an accurate self-perception and then use their gifts for good. Man, a few years ago, actually, when I was stationed in Japan, when I was living in Japan, I think it was around that time that I came across Simon Sinek and his idea when he drew the three circles and he said, or he drew the circles and he said, people don't buy what you sell, they buy why you're selling it. Or he said something to the effect of, let me just look it up. This is the beauty of the internet. Okay. So Simon Sinek says, he's known for saying, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And I remember coming across this video and he draws these circles and he then went on to write the book, Start With Why. I was thinking about identity, and even this week, I've had conversations with people who are talking about how the students and the interns that they're serving deal with imposter syndrome. And I've had many conversations with even leaders of various ages and stages that talk about imposter syndrome. And so one of the things that we work on at LeadComm Gym is this idea of inside out leadership. This idea, one of the exercises we do is admirable attributes, and we did this, earlier this year with some students at UC Berkeley, some of the student leaders, let me be more accurate, at UC Berkeley. And we went through this process of identifying people, leaders, who they admired. And then we took it a step further and said, okay, what about those leaders do you admire? Because what we were really getting after is what kind of attributes do you want to embody as a leader? As you're defining the type of leader you want to be, you're choosing to be, again, this is all about conscious decision making. We're making a choice to become the best version of ourselves and the leader our team needs. Okay. As we're talking about becoming the best version of ourselves and the leader our team needs, it's imperative that we get to decide. That's the beauty. We get to take conscious action and we get to choose the attributes that we actually want to embody. And so that's what that exercise is we stepped through that and then we did some other things. But I bring it up because when we start with who we are, let me say that differently. When we start with what we do, when we wrap our identity, when we wrap our who we are around what we do, and if you're listening to this podcast episode, there is a drawing of a circle, and inside the circle is what we do. And then around that is a circle and it's who we are. And the idea is, one, this is not the right way. Or this is not a sustainable way. And let me explain. When we wrap who we are around what we do, then if what we do changes, who we are is either lost or has to be reconfigured and re-wrapped around whatever that new thing is that we do. And that's when we get into the imposter syndrome or we get into this unsustainable space because we're wrapping our who around the what. Instead, so let me go a little bit deeper. Imposter syndrome, when I say that, I mean, we show up to a space and we're saying, oh, I'm new here. I may not know everything. Do I even really belong here? I feel inadequate. I don't have all the tools. Maybe I feel like I bamboozled them and they hired me, but I don't actually know. And so because I don't want to appear like I don't know, I'm not going to ask questions. So this imposter syndrome then is like a spiraling effect because it's like, okay, well, I don't even know that I belong here. So if I don't say too much, then they won't find me out. If I don't try, or if I'm not honest about where I am today, nobody will find me out. The truth is that if you got the job, if you got the promotion, if you got the position, then you belong there. Full stop. Now, what you do in that position is your choice. You can spend a lot of time thinking you don't belong or thinking that you've somehow snuck into this space, or you can ask questions and get curious and try to figure it out, learn and grow on the job. Now, this is why I say when you wrap the who around the what, imposter syndrome comes up because you're now shifting your identity from one space to another space. And so you're saying, well, so I'll take myself as an example. It would be like me saying, oh man, my identity was as a military officer. Now my identity is as a real estate finance person, but I've only done real estate finance I'm just now starting in real estate finance. So I don't know anything. I don't have any skills. Oh no, woe is me. Instead, we wrap the what around the who. We start with who we are. We take the time and then we take the time. We're intentional about spending time with ourselves and being intentional. We're intentional about discovering who we are. We're intentional about identifying and really understanding who we are. What are our core values? What do we believe? Who are we? When you strip away the jobs, the titles, all those things, who are you? Who are you? That's the question. That's what we're getting at. Because once you understand who you are, then you can build out how you live and then what you do. Gosh, so it's inside out. The circle is start with who you are. This is inside out leadership. Start with who you are. And if you're watching the video, you see the circle, right? Before it was what and then who. Now it is who in the middle, who you are, then it's how you live, the behaviors, the actions, and then it's what you do. So that if what you do changes, okay, at the core, I'm still the same person. At the core, yes, I turned in the uniform, became a student, a business school student. In business school, I decided to go into real estate finance. So I went into that space. Now, was there a lot to learn? Absolutely. But my degree is in civil engineering. My undergrad degree is in civil engineering. So it wasn't like I was coming at numbers from nowhere. It was a different language, but I've learned different languages. When I was an air advisor in the Air Force, we spent 3 months learning French because we were traveling to some of the countries we traveled to were Francophone countries, meaning they spoke the language of French as the predominant language. I'm saying this because if you start from the inside out, if you start with your who, if you get real clear on who you are, then you can express that in any number of ways. God, this is so good. Inside out leadership starts with knowing who you are. When you know who you are, it informs how you live. And finally, it shapes what you do. Who you are, how you live, what you do. These are the circles. These are the 3 circles. And this is when it's great because then it's sustainable. Then there's no imposter syndrome because you go from one space to the other and you're taking the totality of who you are to every space. So instead of showing up in real estate finance being like, woe is me, I know nothing. It's like, okay, I need to learn this language and I need to learn how to underwrite, but I'm not dumb. I've gotten my degree in civil engineering. I've led teams in Japan. I've led teams to African countries. Like I've gotten my MBA. Like this is just another thing that I'll do. But me not knowing how to do it today or me not knowing how to do it yet doesn't mean I'm not going to learn how to do it. And I think that's the beauty, because then you walk in with an accurate self-perception. There's this idea, and on one end is inadequacy, on the other end is arrogance, and in the middle is accurate self-perception. Inadequacy, arrogance, accurate self-perception. Inadequacy, arrogance, accurate self-perception. That's where we're trying to get to, this idea of accurate self-perception. And so when you get clear on who you are, that's all about that accurate self-perception. And where are we really when we're talking about that? Well, it's a combination of mindset and emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, the 4 domains: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship management. Self-awareness is understanding who you are, your strengths, your areas of growth, or your weaknesses, whatever term you want to use. You get to understand how you show up in the space. Accurate self-perception is really having an accurate understanding of who you are. Not I'm inadequate because I may be in a new role. No, we start from an accurate self-perception. We start with who we are. We know who we are. So no matter what the role is, we bring the totality of who we are into that space. And at the same time, we're not overly arrogant. It's not, oh, I don't have anything to learn. I know everything. It's not that either. It's an accurate self-perception. Oh, this is so good. Okay, let me look. I want to look up something real quick because I think I have it. Oh my gosh. This lady used this term. And it was like, let's see if I can find it. Oh, wait a minute. There it is. Oh my gosh. Okay, this is great. I found it. So, I love this. And I'll be honest, I didn't even listen to the actual TED Talk. But if I remember correctly, it's called The Art of Being Yourself. And I just want to see it real quick. The lady's name is Carolyn McHugh. And she had this fascinating idea where instead of saying inadequacy, arrogance, accurate self-perception, she said inferiority, superiority, interiority. Oh my goodness, y'all. Interiority. And what I understood from the way that she explained it was focusing on who you are. And that allows you to have, like, again, I think there is so much overlap between this idea of inferiority, superiority, inadequacy, arrogance, and then interiority, accurate self-perception. And it really does start with knowing who you are. So that's why we're spending so much time in this episode really diving into who are you? Who are you? Because when you're able to understand who you are and you're rooted, then how you live and what you do comes out of that. And there are plenty of books that talk about, Atomic Habits talks about behavior change comes from identity change. And so if you're really looking for change how you see yourself and who you see yourself as, and then you'll operate as that person. And that will be more lasting than just trying to change actions or surface level habits. So good. So maybe that's where I got the circles from as well. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm connecting the dots. So good. Okay. Now, okay. I want you to think about this for yourself. Who are you when you strip away the titles, the jobs, the roles? What's your core? Who are you when you strip away the titles, the jobs, the roles? What's at your core? Pause the podcast here if you need to and really think about this. Like, how do you articulate who you are to someone? Do you typically anchor in what you've done in the past? I'll be honest, I've done that. And depending on the audience, I will share my background. But here's the thing, my work experience alone is not who I am. See, today, I am a business owner. I'm a core energy coach. I'm a business consultant. I am an interpersonal skills trainer. I serve on the new member team at my church. I'm a podcaster and a content creator. Recently, I've been a business school student. I've been a real estate finance professional. I've been a published author. I've served on the worship team at my church. Previously to that, I've been a civil engineer student, an ROTC detachment commander, a U.S. congressional intern, an Air Force officer, an air advisor leading multidisciplinary teams to African countries, a university and city intramural champion in football. Going back further, I've been a student body president for my high school. Shout out Elk Grove High. I've been a mock trial member. I've been a student athlete. But really, who am I? I love this. I'm a leader and a learner. That's who I am. I'm a Texan and a Californian. I'm a veteran and a business owner. I'm a brother and a son and currently a fiance. I'm a coach and a consultant. I'm a Sierra Leonean and a Nigerian. I'm an African and an American. I'm a Christian. I love helping people see themselves the way God sees them. I love helping people gain an accurate understanding of themselves and a willingness to employ their gifts for the good of others and for the glory of God. I enjoy helping leaders do the inner work to flourish for themselves and for those they lead. I love creating and collaborating with peers. I'm curious and I enjoy asking questions. I enjoy solving problems and creating solutions. How I express myself in a given season may be different, but who I am doesn't change. That's what I mean when I say leading from the inside out. And here's the thing. I know my imperfections better than anyone, and I work to mitigate them. And in the previous episode, when we talked through outwitting the devil, we really talked about knowing our susceptibilities and taking steps to understand what those are, right? And then to put things in place or to take actions that guard against those susceptibilities. God, this is so good. So real quick, me knowing I'm a leader and a learner allows me to approach new topics, not from an imposter perspective, but knowing that I simply don't know it yet. It allows me to be curious instead of judgmental. That's what when I say inside out, it's like impact who you see yourself as impacts how you see the world and how you interact with people and what you choose to do. Oh my goodness. Okay. So I just shared a bit about myself. And so as much as this episode consists of me peeling back the layers of my own life, it's really an invitation for you to do the same. What I found is that when we wrap our identities around what we do, when what we do changes, our sense of self disintegrates and we find ourselves lost, frustrated, and we can be susceptible to drifting. And if you're curious about drifting, again, the previous episode 4, goes deep into that. So instead, it's important to do the inner work to understand who we are. Not what we do, not what we have, not who we know, who we are. And as we gain confidence in who we are, and for Christians, whose we are empowered to live authentically. But not just authentically. When we live from a deep understanding of and acceptance of who we also are more resilient and empathetic because we know our imperfections, and so we can be empathetic to others. We understand ourselves, so if somebody provides, oh my gosh, I'm about to go on this tangent. Okay, I'm gonna go there because I didn't bring it up earlier. When we know ourselves, we are more resilient because we don't take offense to somebody correcting an action because we see it as just an action as opposed to being our identity. Let's go a little bit deeper. This is one of the reasons people have a difficult time with feedback, with receiving feedback, is because they're wrapping their who around their what. And if you've wrapped your who around your what, then when somebody provides feedback about your what, you perceive it as them giving you feedback about the who. And so, oh my goodness, I'm gonna steal a line from Dr. Darius Daniels. Did you hear what I just said? I have my eyes closed and everything. I'm gonna say it again. When we wrap our who around our what, then when somebody gives us feedback about what we did, then we perceive it as them giving us feedback or talking about who we are. Whereas if we wrap the what around the who, then when somebody gives us feedback on what we've done, on an action that we've done, then we can welcome it and say, thank you. Thanks for the feedback. That's a gift. Because we don't see it as an attack on who we are. And yes, identity triggers are real things when it comes to feedback. In our feedback workout, we talk about the 3 feedback triggers. 1 being identity, 2 being truth triggers, and 3 being relationship triggers. And in short, truth triggers are when the accuracy of what is said is not there. When somebody says something inaccurate. And so in short, the idea is, let's say, I'm going to use one. Okay. Right now, the shirt that I'm wearing is dark blue. It would be as if somebody gave me feedback and was like, David, I observed you wearing a bright pink shirt in the meeting today, and that distracted me. That would set off a truth trigger because I know that I was not wearing a pink shirt. That's a true trigger when the accuracy of the observation is not there, when the observation is inaccurate, said another way. A relationship trigger is when it is what it sounds like. When your relationship with the person giving the feedback colors your interpretation of the feedback to the point where you may be offended by it, and it sounds like, why would they say this to me? Who do they think they are to even say that to me? And what I do, just real quick, what I do is I filter that idea or that observation, that piece of feedback through the lens of, if my mentor or somebody I respected gave me this feedback, how would I take it? Because we don't want to throw away good, helpful feedback just because of who said it. All right. And then identity, that's when we've wrapped what we do around, we've wrapped who we are around what we do. And so when somebody tries to give us feedback about what we do, we feel it first as who we are. It's an attack on who we are. And so we kind of shut down because we're basically there. We feel like they're saying they're cutting us down. They're cutting us as opposed to addressing an action. So when you lead from the inside out, you are more resilient because you know your core, you know who you are and what you do. Okay, I can accept feedback, I can change, I can adapt because it's just what I do. Whew. All right, let me take a breath. Let me take a sip of water real quick. All right, let's pause here for a second. And I want to ask you, what's the most surprising thing you've learned about yourself in the past year? Take a second to think about that. And if you feel bold enough, share it with someone after this episode or even with me on social media. Now, this is LeadCom Jim, so I gotta give you some exercises. 1, wow, what did I just say? Let me try that again. This is the Leader Fitness Podcast, so I gotta give you some exercises, some tangible exercises to flex those leadership muscles, to build your leader fitness. All right, so there's 3 exercises. Creating a story bank, what's in your garden, the love, fear, want exercise. So those are 3. Creating the story bank. So I did this exercise with a team, an Oakland Promise team recently. And what we did was basically reflect on the last 5 years of your life. Now, the full version of this is I found it in this book called True North, or a workbook that's tied to True North. It's like Discover Your True North. And basically you draw this line that zigzags and you break down your life into milestone moments. And then you go in and you detail just as many of the milestone moments that you can think of, as many of those memories. And what you're really doing is those are the starting points of your story bank. because what you can then do is take each of those moments and build out a story around them. God, it was such a fun exercise. And when I tell you people were walking away learning, and they walked away to a person, they were like, hey, we learned something about one of our colleagues that we didn't know walking in. It was really powerful. It's a really powerful exercise that you can do individually or as a team. If you want to bring that into your team and you want me to do it, just reach out. David@leadcomgym.com. All right, the second one is what's in your garden. So what's in your garden is from my book, Enduring Urgency, Thinking Like a Tortoise in a Time of Hares. And it's really this idea of, we actually have a 10-minute YouTube video all on this, and it steps through it. And the short of it is really identifying the ideas, the opportunities, and the abilities that you've been given that are in your garden. Really taking time to unpack what those are so that then you know, even if they're in seed form, you know what they are and you can move forward with that knowledge. And then the third exercise is the love, fear, want exercise. And this is one that I think the first time I did it was in 2015. And it's been a guidepost ever since. These three questions: what do you love? What do you fear? And what do you want? Take a piece of paper and at the top write what do you love? On another piece of paper write what do you fear? And on another piece of paper write what do you want? And if you sit with yourself, again, this is only you know these answers, but if you sit with yourself, I can almost guarantee you that you will be better for it. You will have clarity around who you are. You'll have more clarity on who you are. All right. So in last week's episode, we talked about Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. In the previous episode, we talked about Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. We discussed drifting, this concept that feels more relevant than ever today. And here's the thing. Many leaders are drifting, but we can't afford to. Many people are drifting, and we need more leaders who choose not to drift. They choose to be non-drifters. We need conscious leaders who communicate authentically from a place of resilience and empathy with a spirit of stewardship. We need you. Yes, you. We need you. Yes, you. To step into that role in your family, in your community, in your organizations. I'll leave you with a quote that changed everything for me. This quote is from Carter G. Woodson. He was a historian and an author. He said, "When you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions." Now, Woodson lived during the Jim Crow era, and this quote reflects the oppressive system at the time. So he said, when you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. You do not have to tell him to stand here or go yonder. He will find his proper place and will stay in it. You do not have to send him to the back door. He will go without being told. In fact, if there is no back door, he will cut one for his special benefit. His education makes it necessary. This quote hit me hard when I first encountered it. And I remember I was sitting with it and I was like, how do you flip this? Or how do you redeem this? And here's what I came up with. When you liberate a person's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. You do not have to tell him to build this, read that, protect this, heal that. He will make his proper place and will grow in it. His education and liberation make it inevitable. As leaders, it's our job to create psychological safety that frees people to be themselves, to bring their gifts to the table, and to grow to their full potential. Let's go a little deeper. As leaders, when we create a psychologically safe environment for our team members to show up as themselves, and we provide them with the trust, direction, clarity, and support they need, they are empowered to put their best foot forward. Now, we'll talk about being an effective follower in another episode. For now, we are focused on being an effective leader and leading from the inside out. It's important to build our mindset, increase our emotional intelligence, develop our decision making, and improve our communication to maximize our impact as leaders. Gosh. Now, I want to invite you to engage with me and with each other. Share your story or your reflections on social media and at me at david.a.bd or at me at leadcomgym, and you can use the hashtag InsideOutLeader. I'd love to hear what this process of self-discovery looks like for you. Now that you know more about me, I want to know more about you. Who are you? What would your who am I speech look like? Take time to figure that out because your world needs you, not just the polished version. You're not here just to listen. You're here to lead. Start with yourself. Who are you? Share this episode with someone you trust this week, and share who you are with somebody you trust this week and encourage them to do the same. Now, I'm always curious, what are you taking away from this episode? I hope it's something that will lead you closer to understanding yourself and your purpose. Stay curious, stay committed, and keep growing. We're in this together. This has been another episode of the Leader Fitness Podcast. I am your host, David Brown-Dawson. The Leader Fitness Podcast is brought to you by LeadCom Gym, your go-to place to become the best version of yourself and the leader your team needs. LeadCom Gym provides one-on-one and group coaching and soft skills and interpersonal skills training to help you and your team get healthy, improve performance, and maximize your impact. What does that actually mean? It really is talking about improving communication, giving actionable feedback, receiving feedback well, active listening, understanding power dynamics and how those come into play in the workspace or in your team's space, and leveraging everybody's gifts, unique giftings to maximize the impact of your organization. If you're looking for the work and the results that I offer and that LeadCom Gym offers, connect with us at leadcomgym.com or on social media on Instagram at LeadComGym. You can connect with me directly via email at david@leadcomgym.com. With that, thank you for joining. Workout complete. Thanks for watching. For more videos like this, hit the subscribe button and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you want to work with me more directly via coaching or workshop, go to leadcomgym.com. I'm David Brown-Dawson, encouraging you to be a conscious leader who cares. I'll see you in the next video. Let's grow together.